What's up, fellow internauts? If you're like me, you probably pay for your coffee with a phone app or buy groceries online with a credit card. Maybe you carry less cash in your wallet than you used to, and you might be considering other ways to invest your hard-earned money. One option? Cryptocurrency. Its popularity has skyrocketed in the last few years, and of course, it's all over the news.
Digital currencies like Bitcoin, Ethereum, and Dogecoin have quickly become household names.
Another big story coming out of China's central bank's crackdown on cryptos, calling all crypto-related activities illegal.
Bitcoin's October comeback comes as other top cryptocurrencies enjoy similar gains as investors continue to pour money into the stocks amid inflation fears.
Interest around cryptocurrencies has grown, but the crypto market is notorious for its volatility and high risk. But what exactly is cryptocurrency? What technology is behind it? Is it secure? And what can you actually do with it? This is Nova Now, where we mine for answers behind the cryptic headlines. I'm Alok Patel. Watching movies on our computers, listening to podcasts on our phones, connecting to grandma over Zoom. Many daily activities have migrated online, and money is no exception. I loved coins growing up. I was obsessed with coins in Super Mario Brothers. I collected foreign coins. I used to fill up every single piggy bank. And now, thanks to technology, coins have an entirely new meaning for me. Technology today is transforming the way we think about value and transaction. But what if people actually heard about cryptocurrency?
A cryptocurrency is an online currency.
It's electronic money, basically.
Cryptocurrency or like Bitcoin, it's the same thing, right?
Bitcoin. Yeah, and Bitcoin. Virtual currency? Yeah. People load up on Bitcoin.
I mean, most people have heard about Bitcoin, but Bitcoin is just one type of cryptocurrency. In fact, the total value of all existing cryptocurrencies these days is over $2 trillion. Trillion with a T. That means a lot of movement and investment in this space. Digital technology evolves super fast, and with it, an ever-growing lingo. You might have heard of digital assets, stablecoins, and tokens. In the crypto world, keeping up with what's what can result in some confusion. So let's unpack what exactly cryptocurrency means. And here to help us with that is Sheila Warren, the Deputy Global Head of the Center for the Fourth Industrial Revolution at the World Economic Forum. And she also co-hosts the popular podcast Money Reimagined on the CoinDesk Network.
Let's say you were to kindly buy me a drink or buy me a cup of coffee and I wanted to reimburse you for that. We'd probably go to our mobile devices. We'd pull up our payment app of Venmo, Square, whatever it was. And I would send you whatever amount of money I owed you. And then we would kind of walk away, very confident that my bank would send the money via the payment application to your bank and we would have a final transaction. Okay. Now imagine if I didn't have access to a bank account or I couldn't trust my bank. How do you do that? Well, normally you hand paper cash or metal coins to another person. A digital way of doing that is using what we call a cryptocurrency. It is a peer-to-peer transaction. I can pay you directly. There is nobody in charge, quote unquote. There's no bank involved. There's none of that.
Think of how we used to send messages before the internet. We would grab a piece of paper, write a letter, put it in an envelope, hand it over to the post office, and then trust it would reach its destination. The technology behind email made the whole process run faster, without the physical object of a piece of mail and without the fees or friction. You could even set up your own email server at home, which means no intermediary. The technology behind cryptocurrency allows for something similar. Let's start with Stablecoin, which has one foot in the world of old school money and one in cryptocurrency.
That is pegged to fiat money, pegged to the dollar, for example. So a stable coin is stable because its value is pegged to something outside of itself.
Fiat money are regular currencies like the dollar or yen. They're called fiat because they're not backed by any physical commodity, say gold or silver. They're issued by governments. Their value comes from the fact that people generally trust in the stability of the governments that issue them. They work as long as there is collective agreement that they have value.
And then there's cryptocurrency that has its own value. So a Bitcoin is worth what the market for Bitcoin says it's worth.
When something like Bitcoin is not backed by something, how does it wind up becoming so valuable? How does it wind up, hitting $50,000 per coin? And why is it so volatile?
So it's volatile in part because, even though Bitcoin itself, and I'll pick on Bitcoin for a second.
Remember, Bitcoin is just one type of cryptocurrency, but there are many others. You might have heard of Ether from Ethereum, AVAX from Avalanche, Litecoin, Dogecoin.
Bitcoin's been around for over a decade now. So it seems pretty clear that it has some staying power. Bitcoin is primarily being used for investment value. People are kind of looking at it as an asset that you might buy and hold and, buy low, sell high, all that kind of stuff. But there are also cases where Bitcoin has been used as a form of what we would consider money. So people are buying and selling things using Bitcoin, right? That is also happening. And the question becomes, is that going to prove to be the primary use case or it kind of transition? And this is again true for other cryptocurrencies as well. Or is the value going to remain more in kind of that investment portfolio? And what people think about that, well, it affects the price of the thing. It's unclear exactly where regulation is going to land around Bitcoin and cryptocurrency. And so a lot of the volatility is when there's a signal from the SEC or from the Fed or maybe from another government that, maybe we're going to do something like ban Bitcoin or, maybe we're going to promote Bitcoin. You see that reflected in the price. So it is hyper responsive to what are perceived as external signals around whether you're even going to be allowed to hold Bitcoin in the future.
Cryptocurrencies are digital assets that are monitored, tracked, transferred, and otherwise utilized by means of online algorithms.
Amin Gunsirer is the CEO of Ava Labs, Inc., a team supporting development of the Avalanche public blockchain. He was a professor of computer sciences at Cornell University for about 20 years until recently, when he left academia to focus on the cryptocurrency industry.
Their strength comes from the fact that their behavior is preordained and constrained heavily by algorithms.
The crypto and cryptocurrency comes from cryptography, the science of securing information by using secret codes, like the German Enigma machine in World War II, or the stuff Cold War spies used to hide their messages. We actually use cryptography when our computers or phones send messages or data. It works in the background. Or in computers by encoding and decoding information.
When we say they're secured by cryptography, we mean that the assets can only be used, transferred, usurped, etc., by means of a private key, the cryptographic key, and parties that don't have this key are not in a position to do anything to those coins.
So unlike from your bank account where the bank has your money, with cryptocurrencies, you're the one who has the money. The same way you keep your cash in a wallet, your cryptocurrency can be made available for you to use in what's called a digital wallet. That means that you can interact with it from a computer. You can then send or receive it between wallets. It can also be moved to what is called cold storage, essentially a piece of hardware that's not connected to any network and can literally be locked in a safe. Cryptocurrency is based on a technology called blockchain that eliminates the need to have intermediaries.
So the blockchain is a data structure that track ownership of digital assets online.
Digital assets are intangible and can be created, stored, and traded in a digital format. So what's happening behind the scenes when you use a cryptocurrency is there's this vast network of computers keeping track of who owns what.
The naive view somebody might have is that online we keep track of digital assets like they are files. But if we were to do that, then I would be able to send the same file to you and to somebody else at the same time, and both of you would think that I am paying you. So to avoid that problem, what cryptocurrencies do is they maintain some kind of a ledger.
You could think of the blockchain like a spreadsheet that is copied across all the computers on the network and are constantly verifying with each other that the copies are exact.
There's some kind of an order book, if you will, of who has how much.
That ledger or order book is known as a blockchain. It's called a blockchain for two reasons. First, because the entries in the ledger are grouped into blocks. Second, because the blocks are chained to each other. They're all copied and linked across every computer in a particular blockchain. And these computers all talk to each other to verify they all have the same blocks. Say I have a coin. I can use that coin to buy Thomas's vintage, unopened, mint condition Buzz Lightyear toy. Or I can buy Reagan's slightly used but still rideable unicycle. but I can't buy both. How do the computers or nodes managing that transaction make that work?
At the core of every cryptocurrency lies something that we call a consensus protocol. So consensus protocols are the computer algorithms that allow the different nodes to remain in sync while they maintain a ledger.
In other words, once I pay Thomas or Reagan, the transaction is entered into the blockchain, prohibiting me from pulling a fast one by paying the other person. The point here is to make sure I'll never be able to double dip.
That would be a safety violation. That would be something that allows us to create coins from out of the thin air, and there would be no integrity to our accounting if we were to allow that to happen. So the job of the consensus protocol is to ensure that those transactions are executed in an orderly manner, that no coins are ever created, that all ownership is tracked, and that all of the participants that are part of the blockchain network see the same transactions in the same order.
There are many different ways for computers to achieve that consensus.
Proof of work is one kind of consensus algorithm. It was invented by Satoshi Nakamoto.
To be clear, Satoshi Nakamoto is an alias for the anonymous person or group that wrote the original white paper describing cryptocurrencies and then created and released Bitcoin in 2009. But back to proof of work.
It's absolutely brilliant in how it works. It allows disparate parties to come together and maintain a ledger in some orderly fashion. Those parties have to have what we call mining rigs. So if you ever heard of Bitcoin mining, what's going on behind the scenes is that people are coming into this ledger. They're participating by purchasing these rigs,
which are special purpose computers.
And those computers then are trying to solve all these crypto puzzles, essentially doing the kind of work that they need to do in order to append blocks to the blockchain. And they're compensated for the work that they do.
So virtual miners around the world are trying to solve these math puzzles with their machines. It's like a race. And the winner is the only one that updates the last verified transactions to the blockchain. In exchange, they earn some cryptocurrency.
So this is a very competitive game. And by now, it's become a very exclusive game. You need enormous amounts of machinery to have a meaningful part in it. And that machinery ends up consuming a huge percentage of the world's electricity supply.
But again, this is proof of work. The consensus protocol used by Bitcoin. Some new generations of blockchain and cryptocurrencies work with greener protocols that use far less energy. And as the popularity of these digital currencies grows, new startups are trying to improve the ecological impact that proof of work created by using alternative sources of energy.
So a lot of things about cryptocurrencies make them so compelling for various uses in the digital world. They're very easy to transfer across borders. They span the globe. They are instantaneous. The system itself does its own monitoring.
Now again, there are lots of different types of cryptocurrencies circulating that have different functions. Arguably, the most well-known and the most valued are Bitcoin and Ether. Sheila Warren again.
So each of those sits on top of a blockchain. There is the Bitcoin blockchain and there's the Ethereum blockchain. And those are different systems. They have different code underlying them. It's like different languages. They are fundamentally underlying different technologies, even though in the broad sweep, they're all a blockchain.
So cryptocurrencies differ and have many functions. A cryptocurrency stores value. It serves as a means of exchange.
You can be a participant in the maintenance of the ledger, and you can get paid for the duty you provide, the service you provide in maintaining that decentralized ledger. And in recent past, those payments or those service fees to the participants in these systems have actually been quite amazing compared to the yields that people get from the traditional financial system. And then the final thing you can do, if your cryptocurrency allows it, is to use these coins to run smart contracts.
The major innovation in Ethereum was actually introducing this smart contract concept, which has spawned a whole generation of financial services and other kinds of opportunities. So a smart contract is not really a contract, is a piece of code.
In a nutshell, the terms of agreement can be written as lines of code, and the smart contract executes itself once those conditions are met. As an example, take what happens when weather grounds your flight.
Flight insurance is the thing that some people engage in. And so if I'm waiting at the airport and, oh no, there's a hurricane, my plane can't take off, everyone gets on the phone or gets on their app and tries to rebook their flight or rushes the counter. And like, those poor people try to like get on the new flight. What would happen with a smart contract is you'd have an external signal. Let's say it's the Weather Channel, local weather reports. It says, oh, hurricane is coming. You would automatically basically get rebooked, right? The code would execute. Once you got a signal from that external source, this thing is happening, meaning your flight can't take off. Everything else would follow automatically. There'd be no need for human intervention.
After the break, we'll talk to someone who's harnessing the power of the blockchain to make a difference in the real world. Stick around. In the world of cryptocurrency, there's a distinction between native coins and other coins that are known as tokens.
An example of the first one would be Bitcoin, Ethereum, Avalanche. These are native coins. They're used to maintain the balances within the ledgers. And then tokens are things generated on top. There are thousands and thousands of tokens.
These tokens operate on top of the underlying coins, and they have a lot of uses.
Some tokens correspond to real estate, to stocks, equities. Some correspond to NFTs, representing digital art ownership online.
We'll get to NFTs in a bit. But before that, in New York City, we found an example of how this can work in the real world.
If you take a drive through East New York or through North Miami or South Los Angeles or West Philadelphia, you see derelict properties.
Vernon Jay is an entrepreneur who's been in the real estate industry for 16 years, specifically in multifamily properties.
And it drives me insane because there's so much value to be had within those properties and within these communities, and there's so much need. The only reason that they're not being renovated and rejuvenated is because the banks are not providing that liquidity and that capital. It's not a priority for them.
Earlier this year, Vernon Jay released Equity Coin, the first digital token on the blockchain backed by affordable housing.
I'm able to do that because I own assets already. So I'm able to use my assets as the first test case in this process, in this tokenization of real estate.
Vernon Jay says that in the US, it's hard to finance large, affordable housing properties.
I go to the bank, I try to get financing for this thing so that I can house 100 families who are suffering from or on the brink of homelessness. And the bank is like, okay, that's cool. That sounds good. They don't really care about that. They care about the bottom line. They would require exponentially more down payment than they would if it were located in a more ritzier area. So the blockchain can act and acts right now as an alternative to financing using a bank.
The blockchain harnesses funds provided by a community of investors who buy digital tokens representing a share of the property. That's the other side of Equity Coin, providing the opportunity to own property to those who previously couldn't afford it.
East New York is kind of like the last vestige of properties that you can purchase that are under $1 million in Brooklyn, New York. People in East New York, generally, they don't have access to investments. So I think what the blockchain is doing, it's opening those opportunities that have been generally closed to the public and allowing them to take part.
With Equity Coin, people can invest as little as $1,000.
So it's opening it up to those, ordinary folks who are trying to better themselves, who are trying to create generational wealth. Even if you're able to own a fraction of real estate assets, you're still able to increase your net worth. It may be incremental, but it is happening.
Vernon Jay says there's power in owning assets within your community.
You now have a bigger sense of pride. Your mentality kind of changes. I actually own a piece of that property. I own a piece of this community, right? So I'm going to stick up for my community now. Being able to tap into the blockchain, right? What you're actually doing is you're creating more housing that otherwise would not be there.
The housing created by Equity Coin is intended for those facing homelessness, with the help of government incentives for landlords. New York City's Family Homelessness and Eviction Prevention Supplement, for example, helps these tenants pay their rent for up to 5 years. I understand now this whole spectrum. I've got a community that needs housing, that needs awareness, that needs funding, a landlord who wants that secure 5-year income, and then a company like yours that are like, hey, we can fractionalize this property without a bank in the form of a digital token, get investors to put in as little as $1,000. Then now we have a runway for the landlord to maintain this property. We've got fixed up units for people to move into, and basically it's win-win-win.
No matter what corporation you have the ability to tokenize your assets. In the next 10 years, every company is going to use the blockchain in some form or fashion because it just creates more efficiency, specifically in accounting.
One of the promises of the crypto ecosystem, leaving aside cryptocurrencies, is a more democratized access to financial services.
Sheila Warren again.
For example, it's not easy if your credit score is really bad to do things like get a loan. Or if you want a very small loan, there aren't a lot of banks or others, maybe some credit unions that will service that. It can be hard for people to get insurance. So as we move forward, certainly my hope is that we will see a much more democratized access to financial services that many of us take for granted. And so if you do it all on chain or online, you don't need to know who the person is to deem whether or not they get this loan because the system itself is holding them accountable for doing so. So it's a very different way of, I think, removing some bias from systems. Again, this all depends on the priorities of those who are building these systems.
In the realm of tokens, there's a particular kind that's gotten a lot of buzz lately.
Now what the hell's an NFT? Apparently cryptocurrency. Everyone's making so much money. Can you please explain what's an NFT?
That's Pete Davidson on a Saturday Night Live sketch about NFTs. To answer your question, Pete, NFTs are a type of token.
NFT, first of all, stands for non-fungible token. It means that it's unique and it can't be replaced with something else. And so I think to take this back, a Bitcoin is fungible, okay? A dollar is fungible. I don't really care if I have this dollar bill or that dollar bill. I could do the same things with them.
NFTs aren't interchangeable. They're collectibles. And like any collectible, you want to own the ones with the greatest value.
Baseball cards are often used here, or Garbage Pail Kids, to date myself a bit. But there are some that are just kind of more exciting. They're rarer, they're worth more, than others.
Okay, but if I own a rare baseball card, that means that there literally aren't many of them. But digital files can be copied over and over again. So how can a digital file be worth anything? How do you make it unique? An NFT is data that is accounted for in a digital ledger, so in a blockchain. This data represents something specific. For example, the picture of a cat, a piece of art, a song, all in digital form. You can think of NFTs as certificates of authenticity for digital artifacts. So you are buying the ownership of that unique artifact, which can then be moved over to your digital wallet. It's a pretty ingenious solution to the problem of making digital assets valuable. That's why lots of big brands are making NFTs. The new James Bond film, No Time to Die, was the first in the series to have NFTs. Dolce & Gabbana recently announced it sold in auction a collection of NFTs for the equivalent of $5.7 million. I mean, this total also included some actual couture. And the NFL and NFL Players Association announced they'll create unique digital video NFTs of the top plays in a season and in league history. In the NFT world, there's all kinds of stuff that you can literally buy and be the sole owner of. There's even a Kobe Bryant NFT coming out. I'm a big fan.
The idea is there's something unique about that brand and its attributes. Maybe it's a player, maybe it's a style, maybe it's a line, maybe it's a font, whatever it is. There's something about it that's unique. And so by owning that, this is a recognition that we spend more and more of our lives, especially in this pandemic time, online. And as we intermediate our identity with our online persona, a lot of the images that we show online are really powerful. And so an NFT, what people do with them, well, you don't print it out and put it on your wall the way you would with art. Maybe it's a clip you watch in your, in your leisure, but the ownership is something that you might make it your avatar online. You might make it something that is your background on one of your social media profiles, whatever it is, right? And these have a lot of value, and they have value the same way that rare art has value. But of course, not all of them have value, and some of them are really novelty cards, like anything else.
I love NFTs. They are very hype-driven.
Amin Gunsur.
It's not a good investment vehicle that I would encourage other people to jump into. But if you love the art, it's a great way to make a statement. In the very near future, we're going to see games use NFTs. And you'll be able to take your avatar, your weapons, etc., your in-game things from one game to the other. And that's a different business model and business structure for the gaming world.
These approaches are examples of something the industry calls decentralized finance, or DeFi. And some are saying that DeFi will be the killer app that makes crypto as commonplace as the internet.
DeFi is a system by which financial products become available on a public blockchain. Okay. So rather than going to a brokerage or a bank for the lending purposes, you can do all of that on the blockchain. And so that is huge in terms of democratizing access to things like credit or to things like, insurance provision or whatever it might be.
Important to note that DeFi is still in its infancy.
But I do think that once we kind of land that, there is a desire to open up these opportunities to others at really small, like almost microloan, microcredit amounts, so that the average person who maybe never had access to that kind of service could actually do that.
I think about my parents back in like the 80s and 90s using Western Union to send money to family in India. And reality for a lot of people, like, would this transform remittances and how some people would be able to send money back home if they were a foreigner?
Yeah. So it's about having trust in these systems. So it's one thing for me to be able to send a Bitcoin, to family and wherever, but then they have to be able to receive the Bitcoin and then transfer the Bitcoin into fiat or whatever else, or have merchants that will take it or whatever it is. There's an infrastructure that has to be built to make that valuable. That involves a lot of education and somewhat of a level of sophistication on the part of everybody in that ecosystem.
Now, there's also a dark side to all this. Apps that pose as crypto websites but are actually fake. Users that move funds there see them literally disappear.
No one can tell you that this new nascent economy is actually 100% secure. It isn't. Of course, there is risks. So the smart contracts who facilitate these kinds of operations can have bugs in them. Mistakes you make are also, they can also be fatal for you in the sense that you can lose your funds. If you send your funds to the wrong address, there might not be a counterparty at that address to help you recover your funds if you sent them to the wrong location. So there are all sorts of risks in this universe, and that's partly why the rewards are also high as well.
I think there's two things to evaluate when it comes to security. People are sometimes talking about volatility. So how, quote, secure is it? Sometimes it's about like, how much can I assume that if I have something in my wallet, it's going to actually have value that I can then use a later date. It's tough to know, right? So I would say, generally speaking, the trends are all online. All of these things are definitely trending positive over time. I mean, if you look at where this has come in the past decade, it's unbelievable, like just how much the value skyrocketed. And then there's the question about like fraud and hacks and things like that, right? Which is more of a cybersecurity question. So there's interesting questions around your data, which I'll distinguish from, your actual value, the value you're holding in a digital wallet. So here's where, hot topic among crypto enthusiasts. There are those who hold everything they have in what's called a cold wallet. It's offline. You can think of it as like a flash drive that you're keeping like in a safe that you're locking up. It's like fireproof, right? Kind of thing, right? Some people, that's the only way they are willing to hold anything. It's kind of like you're having your big savings account that you really never access, and then some checking account that you kind of keep a small amount in that you kind of use, for everything. So if your debit card gets stolen, that only goes to your checking account. There's not that much money there. You're not that worried about it because the other money's in a different account. There's a way of thinking about it that way, where what you have online available anytime is an amount you intend to trade with. You intend to use it to buy and sell things. And anything else that you're holding as an investment, you're keeping offline, you're holding it somewhere else, and you're kind of letting it sit. So that's a common division of things.
Sheila Warren says that hacks and diversions are actually pretty rare.
Do I think that you need to be careful? I do. With crypto, put in what you can afford to lose because it is a volatile investment, but it's not something I honestly tell my friends and family to worry about too much these days, especially if you're dealing with some of the more established protocols. There's this perception that criminals prefer to use Bitcoin. Criminals love cash. Okay, cash is untraceable. And if I hand you $1 million, there's no record of that transaction kept by anyone. Bitcoin is extremely traceable. It is an open ledger. Anytime money changes from one person's hands to another, there is a record that happened.
And more people will be signing up, either because they want to or because they'll have to.
I do think that anyone in their, let's say, 20s, 30s, maybe even 40s now is going to have to get baseline familiar with a digital wallet. But let's be clear, if you can use Venmo or PayPal or Square Cash or Zelle or whatever, you can use a digital wallet. It's really not that different.
It's super clear to me that in about a decade or so, we're going to see a massive move, a massive flux from old school of traditional finance services to this new infrastructure that's much more elegant, where the compliance rules are built in some inescapable fashion into the fabric of the finance system. And you get a result that's far more trustworthy, because there is really no trusted party that is in a position of godlike power that could do all sorts of malfeasance. Instead, the system itself provides very strong guarantees to the participants. The new way in which money is issued, transacted, etc., transferred around the world is going to be digital, and that's going to be on blockchains of different kinds.
Nova Now is a production of GBH and PRX. It's produced by Terrence Bernardo, Ari Daniel, Jocelyn Gonzalez, Isabel Hibbard, Sandra Lopez Monsalve, and Rosalind Tordesillas. Julia Court and Chris Schmidt are the co-executive producers of Nova. Suki Bennett is senior digital editor. Christina Manin is associate researcher. Robin Kasmer is science editor. Robert Boyd is digital associate producer. And Devin Robbins is managing producer of podcasts at GBH. There's nothing cryptic about how amazing our theme music is. It's by DJ Kid Koala. I'm Alok Patel. We'll be back in 2 weeks, which is plenty of time for you to read up on Bitcoin and Ether, but also on all the other coins out there, like Cardano and Tether and XRP and Solana and Polkadot and Dogecoin and Uniswap and Terra and Litecoin and Avalanche and Chainlink and Shiba Inu and there's so many.
GBH.